Right, just a heads up, I have the live stream going and the video is being recorded now.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. The time is now 1:30.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
we can.
Okay. Gabriel Figueroa, sorry for joining late.
Okay, we're going to call, good afternoon. We're going to call our meeting to order at this time. Ms. Tonisha, may you commence the roll call, please?
Sure. Micah Sude, Kenneth Bowe,
Present.
Beth Courtney, Dr. Gabriel Fabrio,
Present.
Gene Fields,
Here.
Terrence Ginn, Paul Helton,
Here.
Richard Howes,
Here.
Lonnie Leje,
Present.
Brad Masters, Ram,
Here.
Ramu,
I'm here.
Eric Setz,
I'm here.
Mark Shoemaker, Rachel Vincent Finley,
Present.
Craig Woolley, goodness,
Here.
and Noah Wong. You have a quorum.
Tonisha, Mark Shoemaker is no longer on the council. I believe it's someone new. And
Okay, do you know that person's name and are they on the call?
Lonnie might be able to tell you who that.
I have that for you, Tanisha. That person is Giovanni Piedmont.
Ah,
That
That's
was a new
from
appointment
Tulane.
from
yes,
Loyola.
Tulane.
Wait,
And
Tulane or Loyola? I
it
heard two
was,
different schools.
I'm
yes,
sorry. You are correct. I stand corrected. The person replacing Mark Shoemaker was Tanuja Singh from
That's right.
Loyola.
Okay,
And
I'll
Mike
get
is,
that.
so they just joined.
They just joined?
Mike Asude.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And I believe you called Brad Masters, who is now on there as well. If Brad, you can speak up.
Okay, Ms. Ellis, you recorded the attendees and the adjustments to the roll.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to our Secretary Treasurer reports.
So everybody should have received the December 2020 minutes. Are there any changes required to the minutes? Hearing none, can we have a motion to approve the December 2020 minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Can we have a second?
That was Gene Fields, Tanisha. Don't forget to, sometimes you need to announce yourself.
I heard a second. Who seconded the motion?
I'll be the second. It's Lonnie.
Okay, thank you, Lonnie.
Sorry, I seconded it while being muted. Sorry.
So we have a motion and a second to approve. Madam Chairperson,
Yes,
motion
are
to
we
accept.
ready for the question? All those in favor of the approval of the minutes as posted?
Aye.
Aye.
Say aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay. Those abstained? All right. Our motion to approve the minutes has passed. Moving on to our next item on the agenda. We would like to introduce new council members. We have Dr. Tanuja Singh, who is representing LAICU, who is located at the Loyola University. Dr. Singh, are you on the call today? Okay. We also have new to the council, Dr. Giovanni Piedmont, Vice President of Research at Tulane University. Dr. Piedmont, have you joined us? Okay, well, we would like to welcome these members to the council and look forward to their service for their community. You will find an updated list of council members on LONI.org. Moving forward with our agenda.
So this is the time of
Do
our
we have any
agenda.
public comments?
We call for public comments.
Yes.
No public comments at this time.
Okay, thank you, Lance.
Okay,
Back
thank
to you.
Thank you. We're moving on now to our Executive Director report. Lonnie?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Finley. Welcome, everyone. Hopefully, everyone has been looking forward to such a new year in 2021. As we left 2020 screaming behind us, I hope all is well with you and your family and your institution. We are looking for such great, things and a difference that might bring in 2021, and it hopefully in a positive direction, the change that we're looking forward to. I know I've spoken to many of you that as we all have been distanced from our family members because of the protocols associated with the pandemic. And recently with the winter weather that we've had, I've hopefully that you've been able to reconnect with your loved ones. And hopefully this year allows you to restore those more frequent contacts with your family than last year took us. So there's a couple of things we'll go over this today. It listed is, the things that we're doing, what I'm considering our work plan for this year, some news and events, an update on the statement of work and what's happening from our statuses for FY21 and 22, a general platform update, and the quarterly updates from HPC and the networking. So I think it's going to be a pretty light agenda for us, and we'll go through this as efficiently as we normally do. The things that really in our work plan this year, these are just high-level identities. I guess you could call them goals, but they're more just work focuses for us. We're trying to, increase our participation in our working group. So you'll see later, if you were able to scan the presentation, we've got a good many that are regular participants, but we should have a long tail that we'd like to eliminate for those that don't participate well enough with us. So we would ask your assistance in bolstering that community engagement. I think it's been a very valuable resource for the community. Just as we've gone from the COVID calls to now the trending calls, I think hopefully you're taking your staff is taking advantage of that. Next it is that, we're on schedule to host we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, our LONI Summit. It won't be in person because of, the work conditions associated with the pandemic at the moment. So we're going to be going virtually, and you'll see that in a second. Another thing is, we're trying to increase the number of our subscribers, and we've got some good news section that we'll talk about that. So the other thing is that, we're starting to have conversations of, should we start looking at specific direct network peerings with the companies that you do business with, because they're high value, high target areas for you, whether it may be a learning management system, an ERP system. We've touched on this just briefly, kind of touching the surface, as the 4 states have come together around Dallas and have kind of adjusted to the pandemic operations and looking forward to 2021. So we see these taking place in our working group discussions, and coming out of that is an opportunity for us to, prioritize some needs and really bring value back to the schools, whatever that might be, and the other, whatever it may be. I just brought the big ones out because I would imagine those might be, interesting opportunities for us to take advantage of. And we would need, the customers, the institution's viewpoint as a customer with those entities, which we are not customers of directly, to help drive the two to meet each other, whether that's over AWS or over some other, network connection that we can peer with directly. The other thing that we're working on this year, we'd like to join the University of Arkansas Medical Sciences participation in an FCC rural health program. LSU used to have, charity hospitals and the clinics and so forth. In Arkansas, that's still part of their institution. They've got somewhere about 100. So we're essentially going to, with their permission and actually with their seeking us out, is to join them in a larger application for the region and use our collective ruralness, if you would, to help both in Arkansas and Louisiana sustain application. UAMS would be the one facilitating for us all of the paperwork, all of the logistics and the heavy lifting to understand the program. It's a reimbursement program, is that you have to apply, you have to get into the cycle, and hopefully, you can start seeing some reward from that. So these are, in our context, is mostly available to, post-secondary institutions that offer healthcare instruction of some kind. It could be a teaching hospital, a medical school, it could be an allied health program, whatever is actually teaching healthcare instruction is an eligible reimbursements under this program. And the way that UAMS is approaching it and working with their counterpart of ours in Arkansas is that it comes off the entire expense of the Arkansas's LONI, and they would do the similar structure for us, so that we're looking at, it's going to take up to 2 years to get into the program of the cycle of applying and so forth. But UMAS is forecasting that we could get a 75% award percentage out of what we apply for. And that constitutes somewhere between a 35 and a 55% reimbursement of your LONI subscription fee. It's going to vary based on, again, how much funds are in the program at the time, how many apply, and those variables that we can't predict. So it's not something that you necessarily can budget every year for, but it may get to a point, as we are hearing from Arkansas, some degree of, I would say, predictability, but nothing you could really go to your CFO and say, I got this, right? And to be able to take that in as necessary, some kind of rebate or refund. So we're looking at, on a short term, getting a graduate student would help us with the application process, hold some of the intellectual property about what our application is and the process, and kind of learn it from them. And then your participation or your cost in this program really comes out as your reimbursement percentage. So that's why it kind of fluctuates. It's hard to come up with a fixed number, but it was quite encouraging. We've been working with Arkansas on the fringes and kind of understanding this for a couple of years, and really kind of watching to see how the FCC is really kind of standing this up and being something that's going to last for some time. And then with the pandemic happening, it's another healthcare investment opportunity that I see that that money could be coming from externally from the federal government. So we're going to be, if you've got any questions on that, it's a lot I said, but just a few bullet points. But I'd like to stop and just kind of hear your thoughts.
Bonnie, this is Gene from UL Lafayette.
Yes.
How would a nursing and allied health program, how would we connect with such a program, and what on our part do we need to do in order to articulate interest and show interest and participate effectively?
Well, I was going to really use this platform this meeting to announce our intentions, and hopefully be positive, receptive. It's gonna be a lot of paperwork. That's the next step. And with any federal program, there is a lot of paperwork, a lot of signing of documents, of certifying this and attesting to that, and probably associated with your certification, of your institution, or that health care program instruction, and on and on and on, we're told. So it's going to be truckloads of paperwork. So your institution is going to have to be kind of accepting of this potential administrative load, but hopefully it gets better, it gets easier with time, and it's reproducible because the information is not changing that much. That's what we've been hearing, but up front, it's going to be some load on the health program directors, whatever that means, your administration, probably you yourself, because our contact at the moment to these institutions and these separate colleges are through y'all. So that's how I see it really playing out. And we're going to do kind of a more of a at the summit and kind of formally announce this. We'll probably do some others through the working group as we get prepared for the summit. But really at that point is hopefully everyone that has some kind of medical care instruction says, sign me up, right? Because there's no upfront cost, hard costs, but there are costs associated with filing all of this paperwork. Great question. Thank you.
You know, Lonnie, one of the things that we're seeing on our campus, and I'm sure most of our counterparts are also, especially those that have nursing and allied health programs, probably the medical school in particular, maybe Tulane, et cetera, is telemedicine has become a huge player in the game. And not that we need to put all of our cards in one basket, for lack of a better term, but if we could find ways to leverage our community and use the community to enhance those types of programs, to augment those types of programs, I think that's really a key value point from an institution's perspective, as opposed to each of us having to reinvent the wheel or invent the wheel ourselves. So kudos.
We just think it's good, just excellent timing, as I said, with what we expect additional funding on the, healthcare, health resiliency side that the nation is going to be faced with for some time to come. So I think it's a good time for us to join them and be prepared to take advantage of, any kind of assistance we can get back to our institutions that results, in this program being more cost effective, right? So more through channels that you will hear, but I just wanted to make you aware of. So as you speak among your peers in your systems, you can start educating them in a broad sense of this potentially. And this is public information, so you can Google it as your heart's whim and get tons of information if you wish. So this is not some super secret endeavor here. This is a public solicitation that it will go out. We'll respond and apply for the grant funding, and if all goes well, we'll see some return from that. And at this point, even if it's even half the number of 35 to 55%, that's still 10 to 15% more than what you are getting now is for some kind of benefit. So we hope that the increasing their stabilization of funding will be there, because there are a lot of advocates in Washington right now. Anything associated with healthcare in some way is getting some financial attention, and I think this is good timing for us. The other thing that we're doing is a strategy of trying to move closer to students. And what that means is, how can we be seen by bringing value directly to students? And it's very hard, because we're a utility and in a service in a way. And it's very hard to say that, you're providing a gainful or a measurable, value directly to the students. So one of the things that we're working with is the Regents e-learning task force to understand how they're looking at future learning and future learning platforms, and then come alongside them and doing procurement with them and on our behalf, so we can get a measure scaled of consortium benefit associated with it. No different than we do with OpenDNS today, we do with VMware today, and some other aspects. So we're trying to align ourselves with missions of the students, the value of the students. So hope to see there's been some talk about that, but as that e-learning task force comes together with some, kind of a statewide concepts that we can leverage and really go after procurement ideas, I think you'll see that hopefully in 2021 emerge. So mark your calendars, March 24th, we'll be hosting our virtual conference known as the LONI Summit. Most of it's going to be, it'll be all on Zoom. And most of it will be updates from us, kind of keeping it light and moving it pretty fast. And hopefully in 2022, that'd be a normal week, a normalcy we can come back to, that we can have our 2-day event and really blow it out, in a sense that we can really be together and enjoy each other's company once again. On the news front, we've got a new subscriber. The University of Holy Cross in New Orleans is going to be coming on board with the collection of a program that we put together of building a ring out in the New Orleans area. As we struggle through the permitting process, we've come up with another approach. So we've got about 5, I think, schools that are going to be signing up for that endeavor. And we had a great kickoff call with WYES in New Orleans. They requested us to be connected to the LINE network for their public broadcasting portfolio that they share with LPB, also with the Corporation of Public Broadcasting. So we look for that hopefully to mature and become also a new subscriber to the network. So some new news and some events that are really positive right now. On the strategic plan, Regents is continuing to review the next steps for the engagement. In fact, there was one last week, so it's an ongoing and active element of our agenda. So I just want to let you know it's not left the radar, it's still on it, and we're just plowing through the governance associated with that. On the FY21, another good news update. It's all green. Thank you for everyone. I appreciate everyone's support financially as we try to do our best to deliver good customer service on this program. So thank you very much. And FY22 service orders look in really good shape. I think we're in the teens of percentages or less than that. We're just waiting on wrapping up some order confirmations. And again, thank you very much for those that have helped, reached out to your colleagues, reached out to other institutions in your system. I appreciate it very much. We are very close to our finish line. I appreciate it. Thank you. This is kind of our general update that I was going to mention for the platform. We've been quite busy. As you can see, a lot of things have happened in the month of December and in early part of the new year as well. So we've finalized our service offerings. We published that in our FAQ. We had emails, we had conversations. We determined with you, your choice best options of the platform services. And even for a couple of institutions that we're working with, even Firewall as a Service is in the potential final stages of making a determination. Just before the Christmas break, a purchase order was issued to our selected vendor for our optical lifecycle replacement. This will probably consume us mostly for the rest of 2021, tell you the truth. When you've got somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1,600 miles that you're going to have to travel to, and you don't hardly leave home, it's a good bit of windshield time and coordination to get it done. And we hope to be able to communicate some of that timeline and that project status at the the March summit, the LONI summit. The other thing that's happened is that we presented a scoped quote for the finance portion through the state that will deliver some of our network and routers and services. That was done at the early part of February. So we're hoping to hear positive news by this week or next week of the progress associated with the Office of Financial and Support Services and Support, who's providing that facility for us with the state. So in total, and that's both of those last two bullet points are multi-million-dollar engagements for us, investments for us that will last us the next, we're thinking 10 years as we've actually gone a little bit further than our normal life cycle would have wanted. But we're planning for this equipment to be a good bit part of this equipment to be at least 10 years of a useful life. And of course, please don't hesitate to interrupt me because I tend to be focused and I don't stop enough to ask questions. So you should have received this morning an updated from me that was Sam's handout on the HPC quarterly update. If you have any questions, you can either direct it through us, or obviously those that know Sam directly can communicate directly to him. But I think it's pretty standard. The things that is happening is that some of the things within Queen Bee 2 are starting to wind down. We are starting to look at how to merge the data and move the data from Queen Bee 2 to the Queen Bee 3 platform. And those train downs are going to happen over the course of the next few years as that equipment ages out and we look at supplanting that with additional investments in HPC. On the network side, you also got that earlier this week, I believe, from Tanisha that she sent out with the agenda. So again, if you've got any questions on that, we'll take them, answer them best we can. If we can't, we'll get back to those subject matter experts to field your questions. And of course, Gary is available to reach out and to ask any specific questions that you might have. And now it's another, advertisement moment, if you would, call for a public comments. Lance, did we receive any yet?
None at this time.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to the chief advisor's reports or recommendations, whichever it may be. I think the first up is Ram. And Ram, if you would unmute yourself, and if you've got a camera, and we can get your report.
Thank you, Lonnie. One of the things that's happening is on the campus of LSU, we are looking at our cycle of replacement of HPC.
That's right.
So that should come online. Sam is fully aware. Sam, a bunch of us from CCT and I have been in discussions with looking at configurations from vendors. And we'll keep you posted on what happens with that.
Okay.
So, and we are trying to see, in addition to providing a utility for our folks, we are also trying to see if we can provide a sufficiently new experimental architecture. Maybe not for the whole system, but maybe for a subset.
Oh, that's very intriguing. Can you, in a short amount of time, entice us with a little detail?
Oh, for example, there is a lot of interest in having a small cluster to play with that's an ARM NVIDIA system.
Right.
So things of that sort.
Yep, I had the same conversation with Sam probably about 3-4 months ago.
Yeah.
So not surprising.
The other thing is also to look at AMD GPUs.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something. And so these are all in the experimental, thinking through stages. But I think the key is that we'll have some machine replacement cycle in progress so that the demand on QB3 may go down a little bit. And because we have to manage demand through the state. And so, yeah.
Sure.
So that's the big thing. And we should be looking at some architectures. I believe Intel is coming up with a new processor announcement, which is going to leapfrog AMD or at least catch up with AMD. So I'm trying to say vendor neutrals.
I understand. Sounds like good competition then.
Yeah, I think those are the interesting things at this stage. I'll keep everyone posted and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I think next up is Gene. One of the things that we talked about, I'll hit with you and you can cover it more, is the transition to our, trending topics calls. So thank you for your assistance in that and your leadership. So I'll leave you to talk more about it or elaborate as you wish.
Thank you, Lonnie. Before I hand the baton over to Lance to give you some details about some of the topics and those kinds of things, I wanted to articulate my thanks personally and professionally for all the increased participation we're seeing across the community. And the operative word there is community. And I think that's one of the big benefits of the LONI community as a whole. And these groups just are prime examples and, of what we as a group can bring together and do together when we share information, share stories, share some not so good, some great. We share our wins and our losses. We also provide, I've heard many discussions about not just the technology side of the house, but also the compliance side of the house. There's a lot of discussions on the side that go along with that, that bring tremendous value to all of our institutions. So again, I wanted to thank our counterparts on the LONI Management Council for continuing to support and encourage their internal staffs to participate. And I guess I'll hand it over to Lance and see if he has any additional detail that he could share with the group itself.
Well, thank you, Gene. Not a whole lot more to add there other than, the trending topics is what really came out of our COVID calls that we began a year ago when everyone was struggling to figure out what do we do next and how do we do it and how can we help each other do it. Our second trending topics call was supposed to be last week, and unfortunately, I think all of us felt outside what was going on, as well as within our own institution. So unfortunately, our most recent one was canceled, but we'll be picking those back up next month, as long as Mother Nature will allow us to do so. But one of the things that, before we move on to there, one of the things I do want to bring up as a direct output from these types of calls was what Lonnie brought up earlier. And that was procurement possibilities with a different set of people at our institutions. When it came up early on about the proctoring contracts that we all have at our campuses, and the services that we use and who do we use them with. The community was talking about that, and it came up that, a variety of us have different things. We use them in different aspects, and we got a lot of different pricing associated with that. And so, as we thought it was very relevant and appropriate, since LONI has a seat on the Regents e-learning task force, is to bring that up to the practitioners that are representing the systems. And so we brought up that idea, and it was very well received. Lewis is also one of the Regents programs that sits on there. They acknowledge that they do some of the same things that we do. So the conversation is going to continue, but the proctoring services was one of the things that was first mentioned. And of course, the next question was, what else? What else can we do as a collective body to help us save some money? Because we're going to do it anyway. So that was a great output from these very calls that we were hosting for the last year now. So as Gene mentioned, we have a lot of increased participation over the last few years, and we're continuing to move in the right direction. So here's our update, just as of our most recent from this past summit to now. It's our most recent meetings. And again, if you don't necessarily like where your institution sits, that's great, because you have all the power to do something about it. And so we would love to talk to you about it and get all the right people involved and make sure that your institution is being able to receive some of the same information that everybody else is. It can help us all move forward together.
Lance, just to augment what you said, and being a being from the technology side of the house, I also want to comment on some of the tools that are being used. In particular, Slack has been a wonderful side communication mechanism for team members to share information and collaborate. And that's above and beyond what happens in the calls themselves. So kudos to Lonnie, Lance, and the Lonnie team for facilitating those types of alternative communication mechanisms. I think that brings tremendous value to the ability for our peers across the state to collaborate and continue to collaborate. I think that's about it, Lonnie.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Gene, Lance. Next one is our economic development. Paul, if you would unmute and get your camera going. We'd like to hear from you. Pleased to hear from you. Thank you.
Absolutely. I didn't present, or I didn't produce a slideshow for this, mainly just because there's just too much information that's kind of part of this. You know, I wanted to bring up, and I think everybody has been fairly aware, you know, really once the pandemic hit, one of the major things, the major initiatives that the state was doing, and it was partially headed up by Louisiana Economic Development, was the Resilient Louisiana Commission. There were a lot of recommendations that came out of that commission, a lot of findings and a lot of recommendations. All of those can be downloaded right off the LED website. And the reason, like I said, I didn't create a specific slideshow on this is just because there are just too many recommendations that potentially could absolutely involve LONI. Many of the recommendations were based on improving infrastructure in broadband, improving broadband access to our educational institutions, not just higher ed, but also K through 12, you know, and the technical and community college system and others as well. Another one that popped out was in healthcare, as far as telemedicine and things like that. There were a lot of pieces that were involved with remote work. So a lot of opportunities that did revolve around the access to broadband. One of the things that was specifically called out was, or one of the items that was called out in conjunction with many of the others, was specifically basically utilizing the capacity that we already have in LONI, as well as exploiting potentially other technologies such as 5G, Starlink, things like that for some of that. And then some of that was also related to the last mile connectivity, but using CARES Act funding and a couple of the other funding sources to go ahead and connect these different municipalities, the K-12 systems, the healthcare, telemedicine, all of this to LONI. Like I said, that report and the recommendations, and specifically the appendices, which lists all the individual items, again, are available on the LED website. And if you haven't had a chance to utilize or haven't had a chance to review that yet, I highly recommend please go and download them, take a look, see the specific recommendations that are in there. But really, I guess what it comes down to is, okay, then what does that mean for LONI? How do we, as LONI, jump into this and basically, I don't want to say necessarily take advantage as much as, you know, help to fulfill the needs that are very clearly laid out in the recommendations in the report. And I think that comes down to, from the economic development standpoint, really kind of taking a look and seeing what are those gaps that we can fill, and us coming together and forming a strategic plan around that. Because while the recommendations are in there, the recommendations don't direct anything. They are specifically just recommendations. So if there's something else that may come along, you know, those specific entities or those specific situations, if they see that opportunity, they can jump in and they can take over these types of pieces. And this is where we have the opportunity to form that strategic plan and get in there. Because if we don't do it, well, then somebody else probably will. So that's kind of the big thing that I was really kind of focusing on, was really trying to see if we could maybe get together and start taking a look at those strategic pieces and saying, hey, this is where we want to go. because there are a lot of recommendations in there, and there are pieces in there that we may not want to touch either. But as LONI, I think that there are a number of pieces where it absolutely makes sense. It's consistent with our mission. And another piece with that is if there are any kind of bureaucratic hurdles that we need to take a look at that are maybe preventing us from getting into those situations, well, we need to take a look at those and resolve those as well. So really, that's kind of my report per se, but those are the things that I really think that we should take a look at here. And again, like I said, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at the RLC report, I highly encourage you to do so.
Paul, this is Gene from UL Lafayette. I know recently in the last 2 to 3 months, there's been a lot of activity with the FCC and some of the broadband initiatives. Has the economic development areas been connected to that, or could you give the council kind of a synopsis from your perspective of how all that's going to ultimately gel together?
As far as how it's ultimately going to gel together, I mean, that's anybody's guess. And I would not want to try to procrastinate on or prognosticate on that. I do know that we do have a seat on the Broadband Commission. And they are taking a look at all of the different options that are available. I continue to talk with my counterpart who's on the commission, Stacey Neal, and about what are the different things and the resources that we would have. But again, it's one of those pieces where we kind of actually have to formulate that strategy and let them know, because that's the thing that we have seen. And we saw that as part of the actual the Resilient Louisiana Commission meetings, was that there's a significant number of people in this state, high level people, who have no idea that LONI even exists or what it does, or if they do know that it exists, they don't really know what the mission is or what it's capable of or what the limitations are. And so that's one of those pieces we actually need to kind of put that together and put ourselves out there to say, hey, these are the areas that we can fill. And we should, because this is, basically getting a return on our investment for this.
I totally agree. I think one of the key things that, and it's right to your point and supports exactly what you said, is that the LONI as a community, maybe as part of our strategic planning process, maybe defining what our service levels can become and what our sphere of control should be in terms of being a partner in this bigger broadband initiative. Do we, just as examples, do we deliver to certain key areas or certain key places that can become demarcs for further expansion, or, defining, I think to your point, exactly, defining that, I think is critical to our success.
Thank you, Paul and Gene, for your dialogue. The information from the RLC is quite lengthy, so I would ask you to start reading it sooner than later, because as I talked and spoke to the chair and the chair-elect, I think we'll find some opportunities for us to consume this information in the ongoing basis as things develop, both as capability within what broadband initiatives the governor would like to do, the federal government would like to do, and ourselves looking at those myriad of recommendations, as Paul mentioned, where do we see the proper fit for us, and do we take the initiative to say we can do this and we would like to do this, and it's within our comfort zone in a sense, or a measure of comfort zone, because probably anything that we do is going to be outside of our comfort zone. But is it reasonable for us to do some of the things that are possible in that recommendation? And that's things that we collectively you need to be able to hear from each other and really get each other's support and be mutually committed to whatever we decide to do or choose not to do, as Paul said, because there are some things in there that has a hint of, depending on your interpretation, potentially serving, I'll say, an individual in an individual capacity, because the broadband, as you can imagine, in a public setting, on paper, news, and whatever, is very much about the people, the individual peoples in certain areas of Louisiana, on certain conditions and certain environments. And that is an area that is not for us. I can say that up front. But there may be some things that we can do, as in the CARES Act 2 money that the state is trying to grapple with now. That's a private-public partnership of how to attain the money, apply for it from the state government perspective back to the federal government, with ability to actually reach those peoples. Well, we might be an ingredient in that, but we might be a very small ingredient, if any. Or we might not be at all, because it's too focused on the benefit getting directly to the person. But in other initiatives that we can think of or dream of, in a sense, not necessarily, absence of what we already know, but dream of the things that we've been talking potentially about for the last decade or so, is where do we step out and say it's reasonable for us to say, as Paul said, make it known that we can do this, and determine at that point what happens from a demand or a curiosity, or like in WYES case in New Orleans, it was a partnership that grew out with LPB, and they wrote a letter to Jay Darden and said, we want to be connected to LONI. So it's one of those things of saying this is possible, and just seeing maybe where demand comes from, and saying, where can we provide assistance? Where can we add value at? And as Paul said, create the kinds of returns that, are possible, depending on where the political ability for us to do so is. So I think we'll start seeing those come back on a regular basis of conversations, both in small groups that we'll probably circle among ourselves and have conversations on, to really pick apart what we see in these recommendations.
And Lonnie, if I can make one more point on this, and I think I touched on it earlier, but I do want to make sure that we emphasize this, is that, there's opportunity here for problems that we have seen, as far as being able to go ahead and serve specific clients, communities, that types of thing. The CARES Act funding, a lot of the CARES Act funding, or I'm not gonna say a majority, but there's a significant amount of the CARES Act funding that goes for that last mile connectivity. So there are all these places that we've run network, but the biggest issue has been getting it to that specific school, or getting it to that specific district, or whatever it may be. These funds here are available now to be able to solve those problems for things that we have, that we've been kind of stuck on for years and years and years. So I think that's an important aspect to take a look at with this, is not just what are new areas and opportunities to jump into, but what are some areas that we wanted to get into that we have never been able to, just because of, again, that last mile or that specific issue that now can be surmounted, because we'll have the leverage that we need to be able to do that.
Good point. And I love your point also, that since it was never designed to be a plan of action after this, it really sets up a context, as you said, such that these different state agencies can look at these recommendations and decide how to put work plans together that they believe will advance or further move the target down the road associated with any one of these recommendations. So there's not going to be a top down, as I understand, kind of, governor saying we're going to be doing all of this work plan and all of this stuff. It's really, he provided the platform to get the input from, the state government, corporate government, as well as the citizenry, so that we as the public custodians of what we're, I guess, subject matter experts in, can help understand where do we exercise our ability at to advance, a cause, an environment, a condition, and improve it in some way. I thought that was very eye-opening for me in my conversation with you. So I hope that kind of hopefully translates well to each one of you that are listening or would listen to it later on some rebroadcast. That I think that's a really interesting understanding to have, is that if it's left up to us, in a sense, if we're going to do anything, it's going to come from the men and women that believe that they are empowered because the governor's released the document, and here are the recommendations. And like any of our organizations who put together strategic plans or some kind of report on each of our institutions, then each of those functional areas within our institutions takes that information back and decides within how do I take that information and improve my certain situation across the spectrum of our different functional units. So I kind of see it, at least in that light. That's how I'm interpreting it and making some practical application for me, the way I think about it. And I hope that helps in the way that you might consider it as well. So good things. There's a bunch of information, a really good broad breadth of information that I think everyone in Louisiana should read. So I highly recommend that you at least educate yourself on what the citizenry as a broad spectrum thinks about Louisiana. Thanks again, Paul. More to come. Stay tuned. So another infomercial opportunity for us to make sure that we cover our bases. Lance, was there any call for public comment?
No public comment at this time.
Okay. All right. Moving right along. Old and new business section. Got a few things that are on the plate you should have saw. So what happened in that presentation of the information through email is that we are presenting the subscription membership agreement that's just hot off the presses, if you would. And that was developed by Regents, following our coinciding, as I mentioned, with our activity for the multi-year 5-year subscription formula. We're trying to codify what it means to be essentially a member in good standing, if you would. I hope that you can take that back and be able to communicate that within each of your institutions, because in relatively short order, we will be making those inroads with you and into your institutions to start executing those agreements and getting those signed. The next bullet that I have is old business. Is that last meeting in December, we revised the council bylaws to take into consideration the chair-elect process of our sustainability and our succession planning. So you'll find that updated on our website as well. So that's active.
Hey, Lonnie, before you move on.
Yes, sir.
The subscriber membership agreement, is there going to be any discussion on this amongst the committee?
There wasn't a point in the agenda that we are allowing for the discussion of it. It gets too broad and too potentially gnarly. We did send out some fragments so that the community as a whole could provide us some potential feedbacks on which we did, and we received some, and we incorporated some minor tweaks associated with that. But Regents is comfortable that this is their agreement that they're putting forward, and as part of the process that we've been under so thus far. So this is a culmination of that timeline.
So do I read that to understand this is essentially the take it or leave it version?
I can't speak on behalf of regions to the I should say the details associated with their interpretation of this matter. I'm presenting it as the final agreement that's being published and that we'll be pursuing for signature.
By the members of the LONI community. Because I'll be honest with you, and I don't want to stick on this if it's not the right time or place. I would like for there to be a right time and place to have discussion about it. I would be hard pressed to believe any of the LCTCS colleges will enter into this agreement.
So let's have an opportunity to go offline, and we'll exercise that opportunity.
Okay.
Thank you. Just to make sure more so for the new council members that, you know, I do have virtual office hours, and there's the links and dial numbers to reach me. You know, every Tuesday afternoons. So that was just a plug for me, so I can get that into their hands. So I know that y'all already know that, but that was just a selfish plug. And next is the 2021 and 2022 meeting schedule. Just to keep that, make sure it's on your calendars, even as far out as 2022, believe it or not. So I'd ask that you kind of reserve your calendars accordingly. And because, you know, 4 years goes by pretty fast, believe it or not. It's amazing that we're already, you know, knocking on March already so soon. And then Chairman Dr. Finley, I will turn it back to you for your wrap up and adjournment.
Thank you, Lonnie, for your information, and we thank our chief advisors for their reports and updates. We are now at the close of our meeting. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
This is Ken. I move to adjourn.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Mike Azuda, second.
Thank you. This brings our February LONI Management Council meeting to a close. Thank you all for your attendance, and we look forward to your continued participation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye all. Take care.